One group remains dissatisfied with government's proposed reduced value-added tax rate.
It's a matter of working on the expenditure side.
Meanwhile, the deputy of the Free National Movement says it's good news. A look at some of the unanswered questions surrounding the implementation of VAT, appalling conditions at a high-traffic public restroom, and the second annual Vagina Monologues kicks off. We have those stories and more coming up tonight. Good Saturday evening, Bahamas. I'm Christina McNeil, and MB12 Weekend starts right now. Thanks for joining us. The Coalition for Responsible Taxation is not entirely appeased by the government's latest announcement that if implemented, value-added tax will come at a lower rate. Coalition co-chair Robert Myers says a lowered rate will not make much difference in tackling the country's debt if that's the only course of action the government is taking. Dana Smith reports.
In the wake of the Prime Minister's announcement that VAT will be implemented at a rate lower than the expected 15%, Myers said he is not satisfied with this latest development unless the government takes steps to address the country's failure in tax compliance.
It's not a question of just taking a VAT pill or a payroll tax pill. It's a matter of working on the expenditure side. It's a matter of working on the tax side. And a lot of it is working on the fiscal reform side. So making sure that, we get compliance in the existing taxes.
Whether VAT is implemented at 15%, 10%, 7%, or anything else, Myers explained it's pointless unless the government addresses the country's long-standing tax collection problem as it tries to tackle the country's deficit. Myers pointed to real property tax and customs duty as examples of taxes that sometimes escape enforcement.
Right away, you can see just in two taxes alone, you've got the ability to collect a lot of money if you can just get people compliant. And if you can't get them compliant on those things, there's no evidence that will get them compliant on VAT.
Myers likened the government's move to implement VAT in the midst of an already failing tax system, no matter the rate, to a doctor prescribing pain relief to a chronically ill patient while ignoring the root problem.
Just taking a VAT pill is like giving that patient an aspirin, right? The doctor is not going to just say, you got a sick patient, give him an aspirin, send him home.
But despite his misgivings over this latest announcement, Myers said he still sees the Prime Minister's decision to implement VAT at a lower rate as a step in the right direction as the coalition continues to meet with government officials.
We're very encouraged that the government's, collaborating, and we seem to be working together. It's difficult at times, obviously, because it's a complex issue. But generally we're pleased with what's happening.
Myers said ultimately the government needs to enforce the rule of law as it works to curtail the deficit. Reporting for NB12 Weekend, I'm Dana Smith.
Well, Deputy Leader of the Free National Movement, Loretta Butler-Turner, says she welcomes Prime Minister Perry Christie's latest VAT announcement as good news. She tells our news team the fact that Christie is pulling back and trying to reach a compromise is good. However, she criticized Christie for his administration's handling of the matter. She says government should have consulted the private sector before announcing definitive plans. She says a lot of angst and confusion could have been avoided if everything was discussed at the beginning of the process. As for Christie's hint that VAT may not be implemented on July 1st, Butler-Turner says if the Prime Minister is considering a delay, that delay should last for a full fiscal year. And there are still a number of unanswered questions surrounding the implementation of value-added tax. Top among them, how ready is the country to implement such a regime? The coalition that has commissioned a study of how VAT would work in the Bahamas is taking a closer look at some of those questions as it awaits answers from the government. Coalition for Responsible Taxation co-chair Gowan Bowe says there are still some very basic questions that government should answer for the private sector before VAT or any tax should be introduced.
Does it have the persons that will administer VAT, primarily the Central Revenue Agency, are those people engaged and employed? Have they been adequately trained, given that this is a new form of tax that has more elements to it that need to be addressed? And then have they engaged the business community in what would be meaningful and tangible interface testing and understanding of how the elements will work?
The coalition has pushed for a delay to allow members of the business community to fully prepare themselves for the new tax regime. However, Bo notes that the initial timeline and implementation date of July 1st posed a challenge for members of the business community who were still awaiting basic information from government.
And so if you're finding that you are behind the timelines as it relates to those various elements, then you have to look realistically at what is the ability to actually forge ahead with it in the given current time or the pledged timelines.
On Thursday, Prime Minister Perry Christie hinted that the new tax regime would not be implemented on the proposed July 1st date. He would not reveal the new implementation date, as he said he wanted to be fair to groups like the Coalition for Responsible Taxation. Bo says there still needs to be consideration given to the timeline moving forward.
We've always said there are three sort of types of initiatives that need to be considered. The very short term, which is the imminent ones, those that are in the medium term, and then the tax structure that's going to be best for the country in the long term.
He says members of the business community still need to know if certain components are in place, and if not, how quickly they can be implemented. Then government must also consider if it has given the business community enough time to see how it will impact business in the country. Coming up, vendors at Potter's Key appalled at the conditions of the public restrooms.
Anything goes. They use tissues, they throw it on the ground, and expect somebody at the public expense to keep it clean.
And a little later, helping to provide better eyesight to children in need. Find out more when MB12 Weekend returns.